This happened to me, and I'm telling it exactly the way it unfolded. I'm 48 years old enough to know when a line's been crossed, and old enough to admit I let it happen too long. The night I found the $8,400 receipt for a gaming setup on our kitchen counter. The thermal paper curled like a white ribbon. The betrayal was already spilling out of cardboard onto our dining table. My husband's friends crowded around a gleaming RTX 4090 like it was a newborn, the anti-static bag crinkling under their fingers, the neon Lienli case humming as it woke for the first time. Our marriage's budget spreadsheet lay open on my iPad beside a cold skillet of spinach and garlic I never got to serve, and the line where the last of my student loan payoff money should have been gone was a blank desert of gray cells. They were drinking Goose Island IPAs, shouting over Coil wine and fans spinning up, when I said, "That money was for my loans." And he grinned like the brightness of the monitor could erase what he'd done. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I'll start at the beginning. I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago, near Midway, and I did everything late. Late to college, late to marry, late to decide I wanted more than temp jobs and night shifts. At 43, I enrolled at Malcolm X College to knock out prerequisites, and then transferred to Rush for a nurse practitioner program. I took loans with the carefulness of a woman signing for her own weather. Every month I tracked them, slivers of debt shaved off like curls from a pencil. When I married Tom, I married his grin, his relentless optimism, the way he could fix a leaking sink with YouTube and gumption. He had a warehouse supervisor job by the river in Pilsen, good benefits, predictable hours, and an unpredictable hobby that, at first, I thought was cute, gaming. Apex this destiny that. He'd play with a headset on, murmuring into a microphone, then pop up to kiss my neck and ask about my clinical rotations at Rush. When he proposed at a Sox game, cheap seats, hot dog mustard on his knuckle. He promised he'd help me slaughter those loans the second I got my certification. The plan was simple. We rented a 2-bedroom walk-up on Lyndale and Logan Square, 20 minutes to Rush, 2 stops on the blue line to the world. I budgeted like a drill sergeant. Envelopes, apps, a Google Sheet color-coded teal for savings and blood red for debt. We had just under $9,000 saved to finish off the smallest and ugliest of my loans, the one that lingered like a stain. We circled the last week of May on our fridge calendar, drawing a little tombstone for the debt, both of us laughing when he wrote R.I.P. Sally Mae in Sharpie. But May arrived with a new language in our house. He started saying, "I need a real setup if I'm going to stream seriously. And everyone in my clan has a 4090. I'm capped by my hardware." I ignored it the way you ignore a mosquito you're too exhausted to swat. He watched Twitch in the living room with the volume low while I highlighted my NP exam prep book, and he said, "Babe, there's a path here. You can make serious money streaming." He started listening to tech channels on YouTube like they were church. My clinic days were long, Uptown Health Center, then nights charting, so I let his words become background static. The night of the unboxing, the dining table was a surgery theater. A Herman Miller Aran he'd found used for a steal, a curved 49-inch Samsung Odyssey, a mechanical keyboard that thocked like candy, a Shure mic, a Stream Deck with rows of buttons that looked like a toy store for grown-up kids, nanolleaf panels holding the wall like glowing triangles of smug. He waved the receipt like a magic trick. Micro Center, Westmont. Bundle discounts, babe. You would not believe the deals. His friends hooted. My iPad flashed the budget app, and the hole where the loan money had been felt like I'd taken a knockout punch to the chest. "We agreed," I said. The words were sand in my mouth. "We agreed to invest in our future," he said, bright as the LED strips they stuck under the desk. "I'm going to stream Apex with Novame on Friday. She said my audio chain is going to slap. This is step 1. Step 1. Step 1 was my loan money evaporated. Step 1 was watching 3 adult men in their 30s and 40s clink cans over a box of RGB fans while the calendar tombstone on our fridge grinned dumber than we had. I didn't cry that night. I stood at the sink, rubbed my knuckle where his mustard had been, and I watched a tower light up while my credit score dimmed in my head. He saw my face and kissed my cheek and said soothing things like a man calming a child. "I've got it. We'll pay your loans. It's content. I'll monetize fast. Babe, don't be dramatic." When they left, he arranged the desk so it faced the window, so the camera could catch the city lights shimmering behind him. "It'll be a vibe," he said. He wanted my approval like a man wants applause at the wrong show. The next morning, I looked at the checking account and then at his phone on the counter. He'd been stupid. Face ID off, passcode either my birthday or his. It was his, 0731. Inside were PayPal receipts, Twitch subs, and a DM thread with someone named Novame, whose profile picture looked like a sherbet-colored comet. Pink hair, luminescent skin, a gamer grin. He'd tipped her hundreds over the past month. He called her Coach. She called him Tommy Tech. And there, in a bank transfer screen, was the $8,400, a lightning bolt from savings to checking to Micro Center. He came into the kitchen smelling like his old spice gel and said, "Morning, warrior." He used to call me that during finals. "You're going to kill your boards." "I am," I said softly. "You just killed our savings." He shrugged. "Short-term dip for long-term gain. Watch me cook." There is a particular humiliation in being old enough to know better and still watching someone put your future on a shelf and call it ambient lighting. There's a shock, and then there's a cold aftershock where you understand, very clearly, what a new language really means. That week at Uptown, I kept a smile on as I did med-reconciliation with a woman who'd been rationing insulin. She told me quietly that the hardest betrayals are the ones that happen smiling. I went home that night and watched him practice his stream overlay, little be right back screens in neon fonts he downloaded from someplace called Own3D. He asked if I liked his donation alert. A glittering animation popped up. "Thank you, Novame. $50. His grin reflected in the glass of the big curved monitor. "Cute," I said. "Did she tip you?" "It's a test," he said. "She's helping me build out the channel. We're collabing Friday." I began to count how many lies a man could call marketing before they turned to rust in his mouth. I looked at the calendar tombstone and decided not to erase it. It could stand there and attend its own funeral. It could watch the living rearrange furniture for its wake. The Friday collab smelled like garlic knots from Dante's Pizza and buzzed like a beehive. He'd invited the guys back, plus one girl I didn't know. "You'll love her," he said, squeezing my shoulders. "She's chill." "Nova," the girl said, stepping through our door with a backpack and a smile that sliced me clean. She looked younger than my youngest cousin, early 20s, the kind of soft that makes you soften back because the world will be cruel enough later. She shook my hand like I was someone's mother, which I wasn't and would never be. "Thanks for letting me borrow your guy for the night," she joked, and three men laughed like they were sharing oxygen. I set plates down and listened to the way Nova said "our viewers" and "our content," while my loan balance ticked up by the second in the corner of my brain. I made coffee. I did the dishes. I wiped down counters in the glow of his BRB screen while someone named Big JMMY typed thirst in their chat window. I went to the bedroom and checked the account again. My autopay would hit in 3 days. We were short by $7,900. I stared at the number until it stopped looking like math and started looking like a dare. And that was how the plan began, with numbers that couldn't be argued with and a face that wouldn't suit argument anyway. I didn't confront. I didn't cry. I opened my notes app and started a checklist titled Inventory. Because if he could call my sacrifice an investment, I could call his toy a liquidation. I started with the obvious, serial numbers. While he slept off a long night of streaming with an energy drink hangover and synthetic victory in his grin, I slid a flashlight under the desk and photographed everything. GPU, monitor, mic, interface, the little Go XLR he babied like a pet, even the Herman Miller chair's label. He'd bought the Odyssey G9 and a 4090 Founders Edition. 2 unicorns in a market that loved scarcity more than honest men loved their wives. I cataloged the Nanoleafs, the Corsair RAM, the 1000 WPSU, the the Lienli case with its glass side that showed off his cable management like muscle. I was kind to the universe. I didn't take anything that wasn't purely gaming. I left the old ThinkPad he used for work. I left the router. I left the couch, the light bulbs, the mugs with pixelated hearts. Then I researched. Illinois law is a forest with paths that are hard to see until you take them, so I asked for a guide. Tina, one of the clinic receptionists, moonlighted as a paralegal and did her externship at the Richard J. Daley Center. We met for coffee at Cafe Mustache on Milwaukee. I showed her the numbers. I told her what he'd done with the savings. I told her the loan autopay date, like it was a countdown to a bomb. Marital property, she said, tapping her nails on the table. Joint funds, joint assets. You didn't agree, so he could be on the hook for dissipation of assets if things go nuclear. But that's divorce court language. On the ground. She tilted her head. On the ground, you can sell anything that's not titled and use proceeds to pay a marital debt. You keep records. You keep it clean. Civil court hates mess. I told her I wanted it clean like a surgical field. I told her I wanted to see a zero on that loan account and never see a neon triangle in my living room again. Document everything, Tina said. Serials, photos, messages, the bank transfer, the listing, the sale. And listen, if he gets cute, call CPD and tell them it's civil. They'll tell him the same. I had my blueprint. Now I needed my buyer. Offer up messages bloomed like weeds when I listed the tower, the monitor, the mic, the deck. $500 for the board, someone lowballed. I have $300 cash today. Another suitor begged, like my intelligence had fallen asleep. One message stuck out. I run a small sports cafe in Schaumburg. Cash for full setup. We can do the transfer in Banque de la Salle if you're nervous. $8,200 if everything is mint, and you include the chair. The man's profile picture was a cat in a tie. His username was Elaine. We met at Collectivo on Damon to feel each other out. He wore a polo shirt, and the expression men get when they negotiate for a living. We both know you could part this out for more, he said. We both know you don't have time. You're right, I said. $8 for 100 then. It's a number I like. He blinked. He smiled. He took a sip of his coffee and nodded once like we'd shaken hands for times already. Deal. Cashier's check verified by my bank. We load fast. You have a dolly? I have neighbors, I said. We set the time for Sunday afternoon. He would bring 2 guys in a van. I would bring a calm face and a fist around the future. I set the autopay to manual. I called my loan servicer and asked how fast a same-day wire would move. If it's in by 3, it's same day, the woman said. You'd sleep better. I would, I told her, and my voice broke for the first time. On Saturday night, Tom left for a LAN night at Ignite Gaming Lounge on Milwaukee, a neon cave where men in jerseys yelled like war was a screensaver. He kissed my forehead and told me not to wait up. He wore his new hoodie, the one with Nova in big letters on the back. He smelled like the inside of a soda can. You're the best, he said. You'll see, babe, you'll see. I cleaned the apartment like I wanted God to see it. I unplugged cables, laid them in neat coils, kept each accessory with the thing it loved. The tower looked smaller without its leash of wire. The monitor looked like a piece of modern art laid on towels. I put the chair by the door with its headrest lowered like a man bowing. I could hear him in my head. You're overreacting. I tucked bank statements into a manila folder and set them by the door, the way you set a coat out before an early flight. Sunday morning, I brewed coffee thick as tar and waited for noon. The buzzer rasped at 11:58. I pressed the button and heard stares, grunts, laughter. 3 men who move things without apology. Elaine Dad shook my hand and said, "Let's make this painless." It would have been if he hadn't walked in right then. The door opened on its own breath. Tom stood there with his hoodie half off and a girl at his shoulder, the light behind them making their shadows long and accusatory. Nova blinked like a startled animal, soft and sorry for something she hadn't yet seen. "What's going on?" he said, his voice clanging against the silence. "Delivery," I said, steady enough to impress myself. "And departure." If you've ever watched a man's face try to turn 6 feelings into one, You know the look Tom wore. Confusion, anger, disbelief, public shame, private panic, and a brief flash of a boy who never learned how to lose. He stepped inside, looked at the chair by the door like it had betrayed him personally, and then he saw the tower wrapped in towels like a shroud. "Are you kidding me?" he said. He laughed, that high, breathy laugh he used when he missed a shot on stream, and pretended not to care. "You're kidding." "No," I said, and I handed Dad the folder with serial numbers and the inventory. "Everything is documented. We're doing a cashier's check verified in person. We'll be done in 15. Nova put a hand on his arm. "Tom." He shook her off like she was a fly. "You can't sell my stuff," he hissed. "That's mine." "It's marital property," I said calmly, the way Tina had told me to. "Purchased with our joint funds. The proceeds pay my student loans, which we agreed to pay with our joint funds. I'll keep the receipt and proof of transfer. If you disagree, we can sort it out in civil court." "Civil court?" he scoffed, pitching his voice so the whole building could hear. "You're seriously going to make me call the cops on my wife for theft?" "Please do," I said. "They'll tell you it's civil." Dad was a pro. He kept his eyes on the tower, on the cart, on the way his guys lifted like priests carrying something sacred. "We'll be quick," he murmured to me, and I nodded. Tom stepped between them and the door. He didn't touch anyone. He just became large, as if RGB lights had installed inside his bones. "You're not taking that." Nova's voice was small. "Tom, maybe." "Maybe what?" His face was red, his forehead shiny under the hoodie. "Maybe she can humiliate me in front of—" He gestured at Dad with a word he didn't say. "Maybe she can do this and—" "Tom," I said, "you humiliated me in front of yourself the night you spent what wasn't yours." It landed. He flinched. He looked at Nova and saw she was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. He turned and saw the calendar on the fridge with the tombstone for my debt, and felt the joke like a bruise. He looked back at me and did the oldest thing, tried to make me small. "You wouldn't even have loans if you'd stuck to your lane. We were fine before you decided to reinvent yourself at 43. There it was. The cut beneath the LED glow. I let it bleed for a second, felt the sting, and then I got out of the way of it. "You have 10 minutes to decide if you want to witness this as my husband or as a man I used to trust," I said. "Either way, the bank closes at 3. Nova stepped back like she'd been struck. She looked at him, then at me, then at the chair, and then she whispered, "I'm sorry," in a voice like tissue paper. She backed into the hallway. She didn't leave, but she didn't stay close. He tried one last flimsy shield. "This is insane." "What's insane?" I said. "Is watching you light a neon sign with my future and call it content." He stopped. He didn't move as the men lifted the monitor, careful as midwives. He didn't move as they slid the tower onto a dolly and strapped it down. He didn't move as they rolled out the door and down the stairs, and the building held its breath. When the door clicked shut behind them, he breathed again. And then he reached for his phone. 911, he said, eyes on me. "Let's see how civil this is." The CPD officers arrived with boredom already in their eyes. They listened to both of us, nodded at the word marital, asked me for the bill of sale and the bank transfer plan, asked him for the receipt showing joint funds. He had it. I had it. The younger officer looked at the older one. The older one shrugged. "This is a civil matter," the older officer recited like prayer. "We can't force either of you to do anything with shared property. If there's a dispute, that's for civil court. Do you want us to make a report for documentation?" "Yes," I said. "No," he said. They made the report anyway. The door clicked closed. The building exhaled. "I'm suing you," he said. "Okay," I said. "I'll be at the Richard J. Daley Center. You know where it is." The bank teller at Chase verified the cashier's check with a bored efficiency that felt like the universe turning its gears. I deposited it. I wired the money to my loan servicer. The number flipped to 0, and I took a breath in that was mine and mine alone. I printed the confirmation and slid it into my folder. In the reflection of the bank's glass, I looked taller, as if someone had lengthened a string inside me and I'd stood up fully for the first time in years. When I got home, The apartment looked like a crime scene to him and a chapel to me. He sat on the floor where the tower used to glow, his hoodie bunched in his fists. He didn't look at me. "You're dead to me," he said, the way children talk to mirrors. "Then bury me," I said. "See what grows." The summons arrived 3 days later, Cook County's polite stationery inviting me to a fight. Small Claims Court at the Daily Center is a mosaic of petty kingdoms. The air smells like paper and coffee, and every bench holds a story with a price tag under 10 grand. I wore a gray suit I bought at Macy's for my NP interviews and brought my folder like armor. Tina met me on the first floor near the Calder sculpture, gave me a hug that said more than advice, and told me the judge on our docket was fair. "He doesn't like theatrics," she said. "He likes receipts." Tom arrived with his cousin Jimmy, who worked as an associate at a firm in River North, and wore a navy suit and an expression like he'd been asked to fetch water. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked smaller without his light. We sat. The clerk called our case. The judge, a woman with a voice that could strand a liar in the desert, looked at the complaint first. Conversion, damages for the value of the items, emotional distress, because his platform growth had been sabotaged. "Ms. Sanchez," she said to me, "you sold items your husband purchased with joint funds?" "I did, Your Honor," I said, and my voice didn't tremble. "I documented everything. I used the proceeds to pay a marital debt that was imminently due." "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Because he used joint savings without my consent," I said, "to purchase luxury goods in violation of our agreement to pay my student loans with those funds." Jimmy tried to interrupt. She silenced him with an eyelid. "Counsel will have his turn." I handed her the folder, serial numbers, photos, the cashier's check verification, the wire confirmation to the loan servicer, the police report number. She looked through it like a person counting rosary beads. She made a humming noise twice. Once at the police report, once at the note I'd printed from our Google sheet, time-stamped from the night of the unboxing, with my little tombstone still there. I didn't mean to include the tombstone. It slipped under the print job like a confession. She let it rest at the top of the stack like it was a character witness. "Mr. Dalton," she said to Tom, "why did you purchase these items?" "To build a streaming platform that would produce income," he said, smoothing his tie. "I plan to monetize within 3 months. We discussed it." "Do you have documentation of this discussion?" she asked, the faintest tremor of humor in her voice at the idea of a contract for a 4090. "No," he said. "It was an understanding." She nodded. "And you used joint funds?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Without her consent?" He hesitated. She wasn't thrilled, but... "That's not the question," she said. "Did she consent?" He swallowed. "No." Jimmy stood, tried to salvage dignity from the wreckage. He argued conversion, intent to deprive, the sanctity of personal property, even inside a marriage. He talked about the potential income his client had lost. He used the word vision 3 times and the phrase creative endeavor twice. The judge's face didn't change. When it was my turn, I talked about dissipation of assets in Illinois. Tina had given me the right words, and the nature of marital debt and marital property. I said imminent default and legitimate obligation. I kept my voice low and my sentences short. I didn't look at Tom. I didn't say Nova. I didn't say coach. The judge leaned back. "This court is not divorce court," she said. "And I am not going to untangle your marriage. But I am going to say this. It is not conversion to use marital property to satisfy marital debt, particularly when the property at issue was acquired without consent and the debt at issue was legitimate and imminent. The plaintiff's claim for damages is denied." Tom's mouth fell open. Jimmy closed his eyes as if he could see his Saturday golf evaporate. The judge kept reading. "Furthermore, given the plaintiff's use of joint funds without consent, the court is inclined to award the defendant her filing fees and court costs. And, to the extent the plaintiff brings this matter again in a different forum, I will encourage the parties to consider mediating the larger issues." She looked at both of us, and her gaze softened the way a teacher's does when she knows some children will learn the hard way. "There are larger issues here." We thanked her. We stepped into the hallway, and the sound of other people's small wars. Tom rounded on me, not caring who saw. You think you won? I paid my loans, I said. That's not a win, that's a correction. He laughed, but it was the kind that ends in a cough. You ruined everything, he said. He meant his light, his game, his way of being that required me to be dim. Maybe it needed ruining, I said. Nova was the one who surprised me next. She reached out, a DM on Instagram, which I'd never used except to like photos of my cousin's baby. Her message was simple. Can we talk? Coffee. She suggested Ipcento 606, under the Bloomingdale Trail, where runners and strollers and dogs moved like the city's blood. She came in a beanie and sunglasses and no makeup, looking like a girl on her way to a class she might skip. She sat, hands wrapped around her cup. I didn't know he was married when we first talked, she said. He said he was separated. He said you were roommates. She winced at her own gullibility and then lifted her chin. When I saw you on Sunday. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being part of that. I'm not your mother, I said gently. But I am somebody's future old woman, and I'd like that old woman to know I didn't stay quiet. He used our savings. He gambled it on a neon dream. I corrected the ledger. She nodded. He's been intense. He wants to collab again. He says you stole. I documented, I said. If he sues again, the documents don't change. She hesitated, then spoke like someone stepping onto a new language. Do you want me to say something? In case he tries to spin this. She made a face. I know how this world works. If I make a statement, it might help. I want your boundaries to be stronger than his volume, I said. Say something if it serves you. Not me. She looked at me like I'd given her an answer she didn't know she wanted. Okay, she said. Then this is for me, I'm blocking him. He messaged me that night, fury and typos. He used words he hadn't learned from me. He told me I was a thief, a hag, a dream killer. He told me no man would put up with a woman who did what I did. He told me to leave if I hated him so much. I typed okay. The next morning, I drafted a short letter, polite and crisp as fresh sheets. I will be vacating the premises at the end of the month. I will leave the key in an envelope with the landlord. I will take only personal items. Please do not contact me except regarding logistics. He replied with a thumbs up, and then with a paragraph of insults, and then with a begging voice that sounded like a man knocking at a door he'd already nailed shut. He showed up at my clinic once, leaning against the wall near reception, wearing that hoodie like it was armor. Tina called security. I told him he had to go. He said, "You're really doing this?" "You already did," I said, and the doors whispered open and swallowed him. At night, without the glow of the G9, the living room was a room again. I could see the city through the bare window without a neon filter, as if winter had finally admitted it was not a blue hue. I packed my things slowly, carefully, with each object took a small breath. My books, my notes, my stethoscope, the cheap desk I'd bought at IKEA in Schaumburg, and assembled with the Atlas of Human Anatomy open like a cookbook. I moved to a studio in Lakeview East, 4 blocks from the lake, where the wind bullies you but the mornings forgive. The first night I slept there, I woke at 3 a.m. and walked to the water, and the lake was a bruise under the moon. I stood there and watched the city earn its light. Back in Logan Square, he replaced the tower with a cheaper pre-built and tried to stream on a schedule, but his chat shrank. The guys came less and less. The neon triangles were too bright for the silence they were asked to hold. And then his job called me. HR never calls the spouse unless they have a reason. "Ms. Sanchez," the woman said. She hadn't heard I'd gone back to my last name. "We received several recordings of your husband yelling at you. We're investigating a code of conduct issue. We wanted to know if you needed any workplace safety accommodations." "I don't," I said softly. "But thank you." Later, I learned that his own stream had betrayed him. When you live online, the walls have ears. He was suspended for a week for harassment of a colleague months earlier, something with a forklift and an ugly joke. Every man plays somewhere, and he'd played with sharp edges. When he texted to say he was sorry, the words wore a costume of humility I recognized from Halloween. He said he'd go to counseling, he'd sell the hoodie, he'd even sell the couch if I wanted, ha. I didn't respond. He sent a photo of the empty space where the nanoleafs had been. He thought emptiness was what I wanted for him. It wasn't. I wanted him to learn a thing I had learned on the cold floor of our kitchen when the receipt curled like a fern. When you push a life toward your own pleasure, the life pushes back. I studied. I took my MP boards at a testing center on LaSalle that smelled like anxiety and toner. I passed. I pressed my forehead to the bathroom mirror and cried, not because I was proud but because I was free in a way I hadn't planned to be. I accepted a position at a community clinic in back of the yards. I bought myself a used bike. I hosted my cousin's daughter for a weekend, and we went to the Bean and stood under our own reflections, small and smiling, until our necks hurt. Sometimes on a gray afternoon, I would think of the tower of the way it glowed, and I would feel a ghost of a pang, not for it, but for the version of me who thought a man's light could be her future. Then I would go turn on my own lamp, warm and plain, and read about hypertension clinics and community partnerships. And I would write email drafts at midnight to a grant officer at the city for a mobile clinic van. I learned the language of budgets for good. Divorce takes a long time, even when you've already said goodbye. We filed in the fall. He hired a different cousin, this one calmer. I hired no one. We divided what was left. He asked for the couch. I let him. He asked for the kitchen table. I told him he could buy a card table at Target. He asked for me. He pretended it was a joke. At the prove-up hearing, the judge asked the required questions like a person reciting the Stations of the Cross. "Is this marriage irretrievably broken?" he asked. "It is," I said. He asked if there were children, property, debts. He asked if we had any questions. I had none. When it was done, the judge told us something small and kind. "Wishing you both better choices." Outside the courthouse, in the wind that tears at the flag, Tom tried one last time to assign me a role in a story that didn't fit me anymore. "You could have stood by me," he said. "I did," I said. "Until you asked me to stand behind you and hold up a neon sign with my future." He shook his head and smiled as if I was the one with the wild story. "You're really older," he said, like it was a new discovery. "You don't get it." "I'm older," I said. "And I finally do." He walked away toward the Clark Street bus. I stood there and let the wind take the leftover words. Once, just once, I clicked on Nova's stream out of morbid curiosity. She'd changed her overlay. No neon. Soft light. A little banner that read, "Boundaries, Buzz." She laughed with someone in chat about men and their visions, but didn't name him. I closed the tab and opened my budgeting app and allocated a little of my paycheck to a new thing. Savings for a weekend in Door County, a cheap cabin, a lake that didn't need me to applaud its light. On my last night in the Lyndale apartment, before I turned in the key, I stood in the place where the tower had been and ran my hand through the air. The dust motes rose like tiny ghosts and settled. The wall showed faint triangles where adhesive had held the neon shapes. I decided not to repaint, let the next person imagine their own geometry. I took out the trash and set the key in an envelope with the landlord's name. I walked down the stairs and past the mailboxes, the flyers for bands, and the pizza coupons. I opened the door to the street and stepped into the bright ordinary of Milwaukee Avenue. The bakery smells, the shouts from the bus stop, the rattle of the blue line somewhere underground like a heart. I pulled my coat tighter and went to meet my life, the one that glows without permission. And sometimes, when it's very quiet in the clinic and the hallway smells like sanitizer and soap, I think of a fan spinning down. There's a noise it makes, a long, soft winding, like it's folding its own wind into silence. If you listen closely after it stops, you can hear the honest hum that was always there. The buildings, the cities, your own. That's where I live now, in that hum. It's not a spectacle. It's not a feed. It's the sound your life makes when it stops auditioning for someone else's dream. The end.